Well, good afternoon, everyone in the room, as well as those that are viewing online. If you don't know who I am, I'm Matt. I pastor the church here. I've had the honor of being the Brinkman family pastor for more than 30 years. And not only was I their pastor, but Mark and Leslie were teammates. They were 20 years served as our youth pastors here at the church. And beyond that, friends. I have twin boys or twin men now that are the same in between Mark's two boys, and they spent hours and hours and hours, just buds with Nathan and Joel, and so connected and to them very intimately. So on behalf of Leslie and Lindsay and Nathan and Joel and the rest of the family, let me just say thank you for coming today. They won't have the opportunity to obviously thank everyone, so let me do it on their behalf. And again, those of you that are online, obviously they can't thank you, but I want to do that on their behalf. Those who've experienced loss know how much the support means, to the Brinkman family, that you're here as well as you're, watching and participating online. As you can imagine, what transpired a week ago or 2 weeks ago rocked Leslie's world. And, going from spending a weekend, 24 hours or whatever with Mark and just private time alone, and then to come home and have Mark have the heart attack, just rocked her. And so she is really not wanting to interact with people as much as she can. And so hopefully you'll give her the grace and give her that space today and just, in a sense, leave her alone. All of us want to love on her and just, communicate how sad we are for them. But she needs space. And so hopefully you'll do that. And at the end, they're going to be escorted out, the family will. And they will go, Mark's remains will go straight to the hearse. And then as the family will be escorted out. And as soon as they can get in the vehicles to be escorted to the graveside for the graveside service, then we'll have you dismissed. But if you could just stay seated at that time at the end, again, just so they really just feel like they can. It just adds a whole emotional dimension to this that they're not ready for. So if you could just honor that, I think you obviously understand what I'm talking about. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're not familiar with our facility, the restrooms are right outside those doors across the hall. Or if you need other restrooms, there are restrooms in the other building, and someone will point you in that direction to help you get there. Some of you might have tried to get on Wi-Fi, and we turned off all of the public Wi-Fi because of bandwidth issues. So if you imagine if 25% of everyone in the room tried to get on Wi-Fi, what it would do to our bandwidth. And so we've just turned it off. And so that may be, if you're like, why don't these guys have Wi-Fi? We have lots of Wi-Fi, but we're just trying to minimize the bandwidth issues so we can live stream this well. And then also, those of you that are watching online, when it comes time to the family video, you will not hear any sound, so it's not a problem on your end. We just have copyright issues with a song that Leslie wanted played. It's Mark and Leslie's song, and they wanted it played, but Facebook, YouTube, the whole copyright thing. So it'll just be silenced if those of you that are online. Everyone in the room, you'll hear it. You'll hear the song and all of the audio. Let me just tell you just for a moment what's going to happen, and then we'll get started. There's two parts to the memorial today. There's a law enforcement part, and you're going to see some very formal things, as you see with the guards here. They actually brought Mark's ashes here at 11:30 and had a cordon formed and brought his ashes in and placed them on the table, and they've been guarded until a few minutes from now when they'll be released. It's part of law enforcement's longtime traditions, and it's part of law enforcement's way of grieving a teammate that they've lost. And so very important to them, and we feel for, here you guys sitting here, and there's others that aren't sitting in the room. We just feel for you. We know how We know how integral of a part Mark was in what you guys do. And not only your department, Linwood department, but other departments round about. And so we feel for you. And then there's going to be a family, community, church part. Ben, Mark's brother, is going to MC that part. And so the law enforcement part is going to bookend. There'll be some stuff that happened right up front. And then we'll go to the family portion of it. And then at the end, it will again be turned over to the city of Linwood and law enforcement for the conclusion of the day. And let me see if I'm missing anything. The first thing you're going to hear in a couple minutes, just so you don't get startled, is you will hear a bugle call. And that's when it'll start, kind of the formal proceedings, and the family will be ushered in and so on. It's not on the script, but could we pray? Father, we pray for Leslie. We pray for Lindsay and Nathan and Joel and Mark's mom, Naomi, especially. We pray for that close family. I pray for Chris, son-in-law. And we just pray that in a minute they're going to enter this room, and it's going to be hard. But like Leslie said a few minutes ago, she'll never be ready. And so we just pray your hand of grace and strength upon her, upon Naomi, upon the kids, upon Mark's family during this time. Amen.
detail. Halt. Left. Haste.
Color guard. Uniform personnel. Present. Ho!
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order. Ho!
Ready. Seat. Dress. Cut. Rally. Haste. Forward. Out.
Please be seated. About 20 minutes after Mark went down, Leslie called me and told me that Mark was down. And I asked if I should come, and she said, well, I don't know. There's so much going on. And so I texted Joel, and Joel said, come. And so I got there a few minutes later, and they were wheeling Mark to the ambulance and had been doing CPR on him for quite an extended period of time. And I knew when I saw that things were not going to turn out well. And Leslie and the kids got in the cars and headed to the hospital, and I went home, and they gave me news that Mark had passed away. And 4 or 5 hours later, I climbed into bed and responded to my last text for the night. I picked up my Bible, and I turned to where I was at in my daily Bible reading time, and these were the verses. And it says, you are the children of the Lord your God. You are holy people who belong to the Lord your God. He has chosen you from all the people on the earth to be his very own. And my immediate thought laying there in bed was that was Mark. That was Mark. Mark was a child of the Lord. He was holy. Holy doesn't, we think of holy in regards to being perfect. Holy actually means that chosen and set apart. Mark was set apart. God chose Mark, from all the people he could have chosen to do what Mark did. And, Mark, if Mark was, you were having an interaction with him, you might even hear Mark say that he was made to be in law enforcement. And the other thing he was made to do was be in the ministry. And which he did with incredible incredible strength. And, my other thought that I had that night was that Mark was made to lead. And everything Mark did, he was a leader. And so those were my, the immediate thoughts I had. And I'll share a little bit later, but those were kind of my immediate thoughts. Finished reading my Bible, closed it, and tried to fall asleep, woke up a few hours later, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. I know we've already prayed before Leslie and the family came in the room, but let's pray again. Father, we do pray, and we've been praying, but we pray one more time because you tell us to keep praying. And we pray for Leslie, pray for Lindsay, pray for Nathan, pray for Joel, pray for the extended family, pray for Naomi, that you would minister today by the power of your Holy Spirit. You would just pour your grace down upon them. Do what none of us in this room could do. We're trying to do some things that might help, but there's something you got to do. And so we're just trusting you to do it. And so minister, we pray. Amen. I want to introduce Ben at this time. Ben is Mark's brother, and he pastors Canvas Church in San Diego. And Mark and him interacted lots about ministry. And lots about ministry over the last year, which has been a crazy year for churches and pastors and leaders. And so this is Mark's brother Ben, and he's going to lead the family sharing time and comments and letters and so on.
Well, good afternoon. On behalf of the family and the extended family, thank you for being here today. Everyone here obviously could say something amazing about my brother. That's why you're here. And we've kind of limited this, though, to the immediate family. Some of them are going to come and share themselves. Some of the comments I will read for them. But I would encourage you to make your way over to the memorial website, leave comments there. Facebook, leave comments there, as I know the family would love to read those remarks that you have. And so, with that being said, we're going to start with Mark's oldest, his daughter, Lindsay. And Chris, if you want to come up at this time too.
You guys are obviously going to be hearing a lot of letters today, so I went ahead and did something a little bit different, so if you guys want to put that on the screen. So some of you don't know this, I have my master's degree in childhood education, which my dad was a full supporter of, and so instead of writing a letter, I wrote a children's book, and it's been illustrated by some of the cousins that are seated right here, and so it's called A Day in Heaven with Grandpa, and it's written by myself and illustrated by Christine Tribeau, Faith Brinkman, Cara Brinkman, and Gabrielle Brinkman. So, a dedication to my dad and a memory book for my daughter Naomi. May you always know the adventures and love Grandpa had planned for you. Grandpa was always up for an adventure. His biggest adventures were with the ones he loved most. Grandpa always wanted to have a tea party with your mom. He even liked to play dress up for it. His favorite outfit was the one with the floppy hat. He always made birthdays special. For breakfast, he would make sure to have Swedish pancakes and stick all the birthday candles into one pancake. If there was a school field trip, Grandpa was the first to sign up to come. He never wanted to miss out on special family time. Plus, all the kids wanted to be in his car. Grandpa was so excited to meet you. If you take a look around, you'll see everything he brought to give you. Jesus loved him so much that he took Grandpa up to heaven to be with him right before you were born. Even though Grandpa won't be going on any field trips with you on earth, he wanted to take you on a field trip to heaven and a day in heaven with Grandpa. He might tell you to climb on his back so you can both pretend to be riding a horse. Then he will tell you that someday he will buy you a real horse. The imaginary horse doesn't move that fast, so he might ask if you want to ride around in his police car. If he starts telling police stories you don't really understand, ask him if you can push the buttons that make the lights flash in different colors. Since the police car goes so fast, you can go anywhere in no time. Grandpa will want to take you to Chelan to ride in his boat. He'll even let you drive the jet ski all by yourself. So much swimming makes Grandpa a little sleepy. He and your great uncles will ask if you want to join them in playing bocce ball. When the whole family is together, they are all kind of silly, so you just watch them play as they talk about how they're all the best at this game. When you get hungry, Grandpa will take you back across the mountains for Thai food. Grandma told you not to let Grandpa get anything spicy, but he does it anyways and realizes it's way too spicy for him to eat. Grandpa might want to spend the afternoon in Seattle. He'll take you to Pike Place Market to get mini donuts, but you will also have to make time to stop for coffee. If you ask him to buy some Dutch cheese and chocolate sprinkles, he won't say no. It's getting late and Grandpa promised to help you with your homework before the day is over. Even though it's just subtraction, he said he'll be there to help when you get to geometry because Mom won't know what's going on. It's time for bed. Grandpa helps you get ready and says it's late, but you know he'll read you as many Winnie the Pooh stories as you want until you fall asleep. When you wake up, your day in heaven with Grandpa will be over. Just remember that as much fun as you had with him, he's having even more fun with Jesus. Someday you will see Grandpa face to face again and be able to live the adventures he had planned for you.
I think there's just one correction that needs to be made in the book. We all know who the best at bocce ball was. I want to read for Chris Henderson, Lindsay's husband and also Mark's son-in-law. It says, "My name is Chris Henderson. And even though Mark was technically my father-in-law, he was more like a second father to me. I asked the family if I could write this letter so I could let everyone know the impact this man has had in my life. Mark was always there to listen and to give his advice to me. Even when he was working in the middle of arresting someone, he would always pick up the phone. I'm not sure how that worked, but the biggest thing I learned from Mark was the love that he had for any person. He could always look past their past and see them as Jesus loved them. I was so excited to be able to see Mark become a grandpa. When Lindsay and I announced the pregnancy, he was beyond words. We all knew that Mark would be the grandpa to spoil his granddaughter. He always put his family first in whatever he did. It's going to be hard to find new normal as a family. And I think everyone is going to miss the dry and subtle humor. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts. Mark was an amazing husband, father, brother, and uncle. My thoughts and prayers will be with the Brinkman family. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. At this time, I want to welcome up Mark's second, Nathan.
Way to start. I guess mine's less of a letter form, more just a bunch of stories. It's the first thing I thought of when my mom called me, and it's always hard to put words together. Something like this because you don't know what to say, and with someone who left such a legacy, and when you look at my dad's life, you can't just look at one aspect. I mean, like Pastor Matt has been over a lot, and he said he wore so many different hats, and that's what these represent. He was a father, he was a husband, he was a youth pastor, he spent so much time with state legislators and police and everyone in between. And if you knew my dad, you probably heard him described as a workaholic. And we'd take family trips to Eastern Washington, and before I can even wake up, he'd be outside in his shorts and shin-high boots and his tank top weed whacking, and I don't know why he'd do it, but it's like, I'm not going to do that. Several years ago, he was supposed to take Lindsay down to Florida to check out a college, and he was following trees with Joel, and one of them, he broke his ankle while doing it, and it was a pretty bad break. He had to get 2 screws and surgery and everything, and so that was a month after I got my license, so I became his chauffeur for the rest of the month. And so one day I'm sitting on the computer, and all of a sudden I hear the vacuum running, and I was like, Joel's home, he's probably vacuuming, so I turn around, and my dad's hobbling on one foot, vacuuming the house. And he wouldn't listen to me to go sit down, so I had to call my mom. He finally listened. She's the only person that can get him to stop when he needs to stop. But I live over in Wenatchee, and I'm part of a church plant. And growing up, I'd always looked at my dad. Just looked up to him as a youth pastor and everything. And I've been meeting with the leadership of the church about the youth group, and they came to me and said they wanted me to be the youth pastor of their church. I just knew God was smiling down on me, saying I was following in my dad's footsteps. But at my church, we use a wedding chapel, and that Sunday night, my mom called me, and I was in the church, so they all just gathered around me, started praying, and do what anyone would do in that situation, just not think, just drive. So I drove for 2 hours straight all the way here. I was going the speed limit. I have to say that because all the police are in here. I could get a lot of tickets. But I started to pray, and all I heard God say was just worship. So for 2 hours straight, all I did was worship. I think that's what my dad would have done. Situation, but he would never stop saying how proud he was of all of us, all his kids and all his family, and he was a man that put everyone before himself, and sometimes even the Seahawks. He made sure we had everything we needed. If someone needed something, he wouldn't hesitate to help. But every time I come home from Wenatchee and just be there for the weekend, he'd be like, we got to get a game of ping pong, and that was kind of our thing. And I was kind of chuckling on the way home. I just tell him, I was like, Dad, you always sucked at ping pong. But no, we matched each other's skill quite a bit. I know he's probably way better, but but he'd always come up with the lame excuses of why he lost. I come upstairs and I tell Mom why he'd lose. She's like, well, why did he lose this time? Well, he said it was because he just worked out. But if you knew he worked out every day, so if you work out every day, you can't be sore every day. Or we'd always say, he'd always blame the paddle for something wrong with the paddle. There's always got to be something wrong because he doesn't like losing. But, he was a great man, and I think the best example I can think of a husband and father, and he knew how to lead a family to Christ and through Christ. So, Dad, I love you. I'm going to miss you.
I think someone may have grabbed Joel's. Accident, maybe. Just like an older brother. I know what it's like, Joel, to be the youngest. They're always taking things from you. I want to read for Joel, Mark and Leslie's youngest son. Dad, my forever hunting and fishing buddy. Even though we sucked at both and never got anything, I still loved every moment spent with you. I'm going to miss your thought-out hunting plans and strategies that didn't make any sense. I'll also miss your know-it-all attitude for fishing, even though you hadn't done it in 30 years. We always had our hopes up, hoping that there would be a deer right around the corner or a fish after the next wave. Whenever you struggle with something, an excuse was always there to explain why. When we would get in a tiff, you could never admit you were wrong, even though you often were. I promise to continue to make the family laugh with stupid dad jokes and a dirty one here and there. I will forever remember and cherish the time we spent together. Even if it was just coming over for dinner with you and Mom, we loved to talk about the future adventures we were going to do together. Whether it was motorcycle trips, hunting, fishing, or building your dream home, there was always something to look forward to. Although you won't be with me physically, I promise to fulfill those adventures with you in mind. Maybe without you, the curse will be broken and I'll finally catch something. You never seem to lack advice or personal stories that seem to fit right into whatever the situation might be. You're always there for me to vent or to talk to. I'm thankful for the 21 years of life with you. I'm thankful for the great example of the son, father, and husband you were. Your legacy will forever be remembered, and I aspire to be half the man that you were. I promise to take care of Mom. Love you forever, hunting and fishing buddy. P.S. I'm not thankful for the weird toes I inherited. None of us are. We're going to move now to the brothers that are going to be sharing, and some of their kids. So some of the nieces and nephews have written some things too, but I'd like to welcome up Mark's older brother, Steve.
On behalf of the family, I just want to say thank you to all the law enforcement personnel that's here this morning and coming and honoring my brother. And I was in the restroom this morning in a stall, and I overheard a couple officers talking and how you doing, and they're both like, man, it's really starting to sink in. And we share your grief. And overheard another officer saying, man, I'm going to be staring into Mark's deep blue eyes. Not sure what that was all about, but okay. For the officer that Mark still owed a beer to, please see me afterwards. We're going to hook you up. Overheard that one. But this event, as tragic as it is, it's brought us all together. We got civilians and police officers and politicians, the public, family, and extended family, friends, pastors, and lay people. That, in this day and age with the society we live in, it's unusual, but we came to unite together for a moment, honoring the life of my brother. And we all have one thing in common, and that's that we're grieving together. For myself, and for those who are here because of the impact Mark had on you personally, the loss and the grief, of course, are on a much deeper level. But regardless that Mark is my brother, he is one of the best people I personally have ever known. And he impacted so many lives. And I have no idea this morning how to say goodbye in a few minutes or express who my brother was or my emotions and feelings that, I've been going through over the last couple weeks. Especially after sharing life with him for 56 years. We were very, very close. But what made him great as a person is the same thing that made him great in his profession. And it is all because, I believe, of what really motivated him. Mark's motivation came out of a relationship with Jesus Christ. You may not have realized it at the time, but if you're in contact with him, this is probably what actually impacted you about him. I've been to memorials. Of course, we all have been many times, and sometimes you sit there and people are just struggling to find actually something good to say about the person. I'm actually beyond proud of my brother because he accomplished so much during his time here on earth that he's made that part really easy. Professionally, he did so much, DRE expert and instructor, and he's been on national news, police officer of the year, president of the guilds. We shared often. He would call me and, express concern. Some of you I know, but we've never met. On a personal level, he genuinely cared about people. He had such a huge heart and treated everybody with dignity. He had compassion for people, even people that he arrested. And he'd share with me sometimes about events that took place regarding that. He had a marriage that others looked up to and they could actually model themselves after. He's raised 3 great, outstanding kids. I was an uncle I'm very proud of. He was a youth pastor. He preached at his church. He counseled people. He led missions trips. Not sure about this one, but I threw it in there, and he roofed houses. I told him, I think I just told him recently, I said, the worst thing I ever did was teach you how to roof. But so I used to tease him and tell him, I think that you are doing this to damage the disparaging reputation that roofers have in general, but thank you. And looking around at the amount of people that are here and the people that are actually present, my brother really was a big deal. And for me, personally, I lost my little brother and a very close friend. It still feels very surreal to me. And I still can't get my mind around it or understand why. When I got the call on Sunday, it was beyond devastating. Understand, we grew up together as kids, and we lived in rural places, and so oftentimes we didn't have other people to play with. We had each other, and so we became very close over the years. And all I kept saying is, Marky's gone. And it just did not seem possible. In my life, from this point on, is never going to be the same without him. I'm going to miss our phone calls, our conversations. And his nickname for me was Weesey, only because he couldn't say Stevie when he was a kid. So I'm going to miss him calling me up and saying, hey, Wees. But I have so many memories of him. We grew up together. We were always close. We played together. We built forts together. We hunted and fished together. And he sucked back then, too, by the way. So, through the course of my life, I lost my way several times. But my brother was always there for me and hoped and prayed for me. And actually genuinely believed in me in spite of myself. And with that Mark grin that we're all familiar with, would welcome me back, and he would love on me. And I don't know how others feel about him. My brother Mark always had a calming effect on me personally. Even though he is my younger brother, he's someone I looked up to. And bro, I know that saying goodbye right now is not permanent. And it is temporary. But I so wish that you were still here and I could see you again, hear your voice again for one more time. But for me, the impact that you have left on me personally, I still carry with me. And for that, I'm grateful. I was asking myself the question out loud actually this morning as I stood and looked over the sound, why? The reality is this side of heaven, this side of eternity. That question may never get answered for me. But I'll always carry my brother in my heart because the ripple effect, the impact he's had on my life is something that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life.
I'm going to read a couple of more. From the family, I'm going to read from my brother Ted, and then I'm going to read my mom's. that she wrote out. Ted was the third of the four of us, so Mark's first younger brother. This is Mark. He's not just my brother. He is my friend, a role model, and a mentor. There's a void in my heart and a piece of me I can never get back. God's timing is something I will never understand. It's a hope that is within me through Jesus Christ, that we will all see each other again someday. Keeps me going. Ted. I'm going to read my mom's. This is Mark Theodore Brinkman. A couple of years after our first son, Steve, was born, we decided we would like to have another child. I'm not sure after Steve was born why you would. Just kidding. We'd like to have another child, a brother or a sister for Steve, our firstborn. But nothing happened. I finally consulted a specialist and a procedure was done that enabled conception. Mark was born a year later, a little over 5 years after his brother Steve, on June 29th, 1965. My parents knew how much I wanted another child, so Mark's baby dedication, performed by my father, who was a pastor, my mother read the scriptures from the book of 1 Samuel in the Bible. After barren Hannah had her first child, I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life, he will be given over to the Lord. Mark was a very easy, compliant child. We're not sure what happened later in his life, but he thrived attending a Dutch school in Holland where we lived from 1970 to 1974. From kindergarten through the 4th grade, when we would come back to the States in 1975, he was speaking Dutch like a native. There was a boy who lived in the same apartment building as our family named Benny, whom everyone picked on. Mark befriended him, and he and Mark were best friends during the 4 years we lived in Holland. We located to Plummer, Idaho when we returned from Holland, where my husband pastored a church and Mark was baptized in water at Lake Chatcolet at his own request at the age of 12. He attended schools in Plummer, Idaho up to his sophomore year and learned to play clarinet and band. When we returned to Whidbey Island in 1982, Mark completed his sophomore year at Lighthouse Christian School and went on to graduate in 1984. Even though they didn't date in high school, that is where Mark met his wife, Leslie. Mark had his moments as a teenager, but he made a decision on his own, the direction his life would take. He had wanted to work in law enforcement from the time he was very young and never deviated from that ambition. I'm very proud as a mom for the accomplishment of my son and the many, many lives he touched through his short life, both as a youth pastor and in law enforcement. I know that in spite of all the stories that have emerged since passing, that we haven't heard half of the stories yet. We who are left behind are filled with the questions of why. Someone so young, and why someone who has such an impact on others' lives would be taken, and there's no easy answer. A verse from the Bible that has brought me comfort is found in Isaiah 57, verse 1. The righteous perish, and no one ponders in its heart. Devout men are taken away, and no one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. I love you, and I'll see you soon, Mark. Mom. I want to read from a couple of the nieces before I share some closing thoughts and my sentiments. From Gabrielle, a niece who went on a mission trip with Mark and Leslie. Uncle Mark, you made me feel safe. You're always the kindest, most peaceful presence in the room. The pair of understanding eyes I looked to when our family was being just a bit chaotic. I'll never forget your eggnog lattes. I'll never forget your hugs. I'll never forget your sense of humor. But man, I would love to rerun some of those crazy police stories again. Just like Papa Brinkman and maybe a few other Brinkmans, I probably should have done more than simply pretend to understand what the heck you were saying. I don't know where I would be spiritually if it weren't for you. If you hadn't persuaded me into joining you on one of those Mexico missions trips. I will forever be grateful for that experience and further bond between us, along with Aunt Leslie, Nathan, and Joel. I wish I told you in person how much I look up to you, how in awe I am of the person you are to so many. I'll never stop admiring you. I will never stop yearning to lead like you did. About a month ago, the night of Lindsay's baby shower, we were surprised and so happy you came back from work early to see us. When we left that night, I couldn't shake the feeling, this nagging sense I might not see you for a very, very long time. And I cried. My mom didn't know where the tears came from, and neither did I, but I know now. I wish I told you more then just how much I love you, how much I've treasured every moment with you, what you mean to me and so many others. You are the best. Love, your niece, Gabrielle. From Cara and Faith Brinkman, two more of Mark's nieces. Uncle Mark, the last time we saw you was in January, right after Christmas. We met you at Papa's grave with Mom and Dad and talked for over an hour in the freezing cold weather. Thank God that we were able to see you that day, even if we didn't know it would be for the last time. We'll never forget the summer trips to the property, playing bocce ball, there it is again, as a family, and especially the time you flung us off the inner tube because you went too fast while doing donuts to the boat. Thank you for your dedication to your family and your extended family and the time and energy you put into your community and work. We know you have made an impact through your love, generosity, and godly nature that will surely affect generations. Love, Cara, and Faith. I want to just conclude this time just by sharing something. Many stories have been shared, and I could share a story, and I'm sure everyone here could. But as I was praying, saying, Lord, what would you have me share? I felt like the Holy Spirit gave me this verse that really could summarize Mark's life, as if you could summarize it in one verse. But this verse is found in Proverbs 22, verse 29. It says, do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. And as I look around the room, there's a lot of great people in here that he stood before. And I was just asking, God, why is that? And I just want to share with you real quickly the three main impacts he had on my life, and maybe you could share with them. What I learned from my brother Mark, number one, is he knew how to love well. He loved God with all his heart, all of his soul, all of his might, all of his strength. And I believe that was the platform for everything else that happened in his life, was his love for God. He loved his family, and he loved his family well. Loved his kids, loved his wife, loved his mom. I'd often go over to my mom's house and see flowers there. Special occasion that just maybe took place. Maybe it was remembering an anniversary of my mom's or her birthday. And sure enough, there they were from Mark. He knew how to love well. He knew how to love the church well. He knew how to love ministry well. And as everyone in here can attest, he knew how to love people well. No matter what their background was, no matter what they did, no matter what they had done, he knew how to love people well. I think the second thing I would learn from my brother is that he knew how to live well. And that started, again, with his kindness to others. He knew how to live well. He treated people with respect, with kindness. And I read this quote out of the Everett Herald that said, he was known for his caring and kindness, even to those he arrested. Treated everyone with kindness and authenticity. Not only knew how to treat people well, he knew how to have fun. My brother knew how to have fun and enjoy life, enjoy the fruit of his labor when it was time to unwind with family. And we'd go and have fun. He knew how to laugh. He knew how to make people laugh. And I think we can all agree that Mark was an 80s covers band best friend. There's another quote from the Everett Herald that says, he could spot a drunken driver even with Def Leppard music blaring in the patrol car. He loved his 80s bands. I remember talking to him one time. He was going to Vegas. He said, we're going to see a show. I said, what are you going to see? The Beatles, Celine Dion? He goes, no, we're going to Fremont Street to see an 80s covers band. It's like, okay, enjoy that. He knew how to love well. He knew how to live well. And lastly, I believe he really knew how to lead well. He knew how to lead really in every arena of life, whether it be his family, his kids, his wife, his brothers, within the church, his charisma, his work ethic, his character. He knew how to lead in missions as he would take many people on missions trips. I believe he knew how to lead well because I believe he lived out this verse. Everything your hand finds to do, do it as unto the Lord. Mark was a man who stood before many great people, taught us how to love well, to live well, and to lead well. And although he is no longer standing with us today, his legacy will live on as he now stands before the greatest king of all times, King of Kings, Jesus Christ. And I know the words that king would say to Mark, well done, good and faithful servant. You have fought the good fight. You have finished the race. You have kept the faith. I love you, brother.
After finally falling asleep the night Mark passed away, I woke up a couple hours later, and my mind was racing, thinking about Mark and thinking about Leslie and the kids. And, I sat there just thinking about all the various things that we had encountered over the years together. And one of my thoughts was about Mark and basketball. This might seem weird, but it's just one of the first thoughts that came. Mark loved MMA, mixed martial arts. There's something was going on on TV or something. Mark would invite people over, and a whole bunch of young guys, my guys included, would meet in their basement, and the MMA would be on, and I can only imagine. I don't know if anybody ever got hurt, but I can only imagine the kind of the role playing guys did, kicking one another, the whole thing, and so Mark loved MMA. Mark also loved football. Somebody already mentioned the Seahawks again. If there was a game going on, or Seahawks, or a playoff, whatever it happened to be, Mark would gather guys, and my son-in-law, my boys. I mean, they just, a couple times I was there. I'm not a huge football fan, but a couple days times I was there, and I don't know that anybody ever got hurt in their basement when a football game was going on. But when we got together to play basketball, that was a different story, because Mark combined MMA and football into basketball. I've played a lot of basketball in a lot of places, in playgrounds in Renton and Pasadena and in Australia, and so I've seen some rough basketball. But when Mark was on this court right here, we have hoops and we played for years, and it was a full contact sport with Mark. There were guys that wouldn't play anymore with Mark. The question was, is Mark playing? And that would determine whether they wanted to, join the game or not. And so, again, that's just one of my first thoughts. As I laid there in bed, I knew shortly exactly what I was going to talk about today, just in some thoughts about Mark. And it had to do with hats. That's, I think Nathan mentioned, they have the hats here, a handful of Mark's hats. And, there was a painting that got recognition in the 1920s, and the title of the painting was "The Hat Makes the Man." And that, that was during the time where men wore fedoras and bowlers and driving caps, and it was just, there weren't trucker caps. They were just, all these fancy hats that men wore, and so it kind of became a saying that people used. The hat makes the man. The hat makes the man. And I thought about, again, I'm just laying in bed, but I thought about how all the hats Mark wore. Mark wore a sun hat, and Naomi would tell you he wore the sun hat very well. Ben made comments of that. Now, I thought Ben was going to say when flowers were at Naomi's house, Mark had shown him up again. but Mark wore his son hat very well. Mark wore his husband hat very well. You may not know that Friday, 2 days ago, was Leslie and Mark's 33rd anniversary. They were supposed to be gone this weekend. Mark wore his husband hat very well. And Leslie would trade, it would take, let me say it this way, it would take 100 of you to make the husband Mark was. He just wore his husband hat very well. He wore his father hat really well. And being a father fit him. You know, it fit. And Steve mentioned he had a roofer hat or a builder hat, a fisherman hat, a boater hat. You know, some of you, I thought maybe one of the kids had mentioned the story, and I might not have all the details right, but one time they were on a family outing and they were in the Columbia River over by you guys, John and Tarina, and, you know, in the boat or the ski boat or whatever it was, and he lost his phone and it went into the river. And so he comes back home because, you know, law enforcement, you live by your phone. Most of us live by our phone. And so he goes in to get a new phone replaced, and they said, well, we can't get you a new phone with the same number because your phone's still working. So in the Columbia River, in a waterproof case, the phone was still working and was unable to get it replaced. So he loved boating. He was a boater hat. He wore a youth pastor hat very well. You know, there's lots of young people in the room, lots of young people online watching. Pick on Jake here. You know, Jake was one of Mark's and Leslie's kids, went on 2 different missions trips. That's why we have the interpreters here, so that Jake said, I have to be there. I got to be there. Played a significant role in not only Jake's life, but so many other lives. He wore his youth pastor hat very well. Some of you may not know that he was licensed in 2006 as a pastor. You know, he wore his teacher hat well. You know, when I needed a break, and I would just call Mark and I say, Mark, can you teach for me? And, you know, if he couldn't do it that weekend, he would do it, you know, maybe a weekend later so I could, you know, have some time off. And our people around the church here loved Mark's cop stories. They just loved him, his cop stories. He'd always start with cop stories. And sometimes when Mark was telling a cop story, I was, you know, if I happened to be here that day, I'm going, Mark, don't tell that story. Don't tell that story. Please don't tell that story, Mark. He had a mentor hat that he wore. He wore a missionary hat. You know, 6 different years, Mark and Leslie sacrificed vacations to take students to the San Joaquin Valley down in Mexico. And again, it touched people's lives. One year they took 22 students. Can you imagine taking 22 students to Mexico for a week and a half and all the chaos? But they loved it. And spent a lot of time raising money so that kids could go on those missions trips. Mark wore that hat as a law enforcement officer. Some of those are up here. And it was the first hat Mark ever wanted to wear. You know, he wanted to be a law enforcement officer since he was a little tiny guy. And even as a police officer, he wore all kinds of different hats. He was a Langley police officer. And then he was an Island County deputy, and then and I've encountered people here on the island that I interact with, and they'll tell me they're sorry that Mark passed away, knowing our relationship. And, you know, I remember one young lady or young mom said, he was my DARE officer. Still remember him as the DARE officer. A police academy instructor hat, drug recognition expert, an instructor hat, guild president hat, walk cops, vice president hat. You know, the last year he spent a whole bunch of time working with he worked with people in Olympia on all the legislation that's going on, you know, that we're hearing so much about in the news, and as an advocate for law enforcement and kind of some sanity in regards to some of the, you know, laws that are trying to be passed. And I could keep talking. You get the idea. And the saying is that the hat makes the man, but the hat never made Mark. The hat never made Mark. You know, whether it was 1 hat, 2 hats, 10 hats, Mark was who he was regardless of the hat he wore. You know, if he wore his law enforcement hat and then switched it off to be his dad hat or switched it off to be, Mark was the same. You probably caught, and if you didn't, I did because of interacting with family, how many people said he was a calming presence. You know, the family has said that he was just this calming presence. So it didn't matter what Mark wore, what a hat Mark wore. Mark was the man under the hat. The hat didn't make him the man. And Mark was who he was in the hats he wore because of Jesus. You know, under every hat that Mark wore was a Jesus man. He committed his life to follow Jesus, and when he surrendered, as Naomi mentioned in her letter, as a teenager, he surrendered control of his life to Jesus. Jesus changed him. And, you know, the man you encountered was a man who was a Jesus man. Underneath everything. You know, I was thinking about how Mark was the example of a dedicated public servant. I mean, just think about all the things that have been mentioned. Whether it was the guild, or it was walk cops, or it was, you know, law enforcement, or it was DARE, or it was whatever it happened to be. I mean, he was the exemplary public servant. And it shouldn't surprise us because Jesus was a servant. That's why Mark was a servant. You know, C.S. Lewis, in one of his famous writings, he said this. He said, Christianity, if false, is of no importance. Christianity, if false, is of no importance. And if true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. Mark never took his relationship with Jesus and his service as a knight to the King of Kings lightly. He took it very seriously. And that's why we knew the man under the hats. And you know, no matter what hat you wear, you'll be the same old man or woman unless Jesus grabs a hold of you. And unless he does, again, we can be made by the hat. But you can be, and I can be, we can be the man or the woman of Jesus under the hat, whatever we wore. You know, as a little side note, and Mark would love me saying this, as a little side note, Mark's going to have to find a new occupation in heaven. Because preachers aren't going to be needed in heaven. And law enforcement will not be needed in heaven. So he's got to, I don't know what that's going to be, but he's going to have to find a new employment in heaven. We're going to have a family slideshow video right now. And again, if you're watching online, it will be muted online. So you won't be able to hear any sound. It's not a problem. It's because of copyright issues. And then we'll turn things over to, again, to the city of Linwood and Linwood law enforcement. So.
Well, good afternoon, family and friends. I'm honored to be here with you tonight, or this afternoon. And I understand there's a quorum of our Linwood City Council here celebrating Mark's life with you today, so I thank them for joining us. This afternoon, I just want to encourage you to begin to make and embrace memories of Mark. I have a couple. 2013 was when I was running for mayor, and I had to go get an interview from the police guild. We met at Cask and Trotter in Linwood. I was terrified. After spending 26 years in higher ed and I decided to run for mayor, I just really didn't have a clue what all that was about. But as many of you have already mentioned, Mark brought calm. During my time as mayor, Mark would sort of saunter into my office. He was always so quiet for his stature, so it was a little bit surprised to see him. He would talk about what his kids were doing and how proud he was of you. He talked about what he was going to be doing for the youth pastor program that coming year. He talked about his ambitions to possibly be sheriff of this fine county. He even talked to me about being the police chief of Linwood. He introduced me to aloe wheat grass juice. Come to find out, we shared a condition, and it wasn't toes. Now that I hear that's a condition. Wasn't toast. And ever since I have started taking aloe wheatgrass juice, my condition has not flared up in years. So every time I unscrew a bottle of that juice, I will think of Mark. In 2009, I was in India participating in a Rotary group study exchange. My mother died while I was there. My father called me and said that I was not only reading, but I was writing the eulogy for my mother's celebration of life, which happened to be on my 50th birthday after I got home. I quickly made a list of everything I could remember about her. Dimples in her cheek and her soft gray hair and her love of gardening and quilting and all of that. But I share that because as I prepared my mother's eulogy, I found passages and poems of hope and comfort. And today I want to share this short message by Lizzie Gibbons, who's a television and radio personality, called Soul Print. The way we get to live forever is through memories, stored in the heart and souls of those whose lives we touch. That's our soul print. It's our comfort, our emotional nourishment at the end of day and at the end of life. How wonderful that they are called upon at will and savored randomly. Seems to me we should spend our lives in a conscious state of creating these meaningful moments that live on. Memories matter.
And then let me introduce the Linwood Chief of Police, Jim Nelson.
Like many others before me have said, Officer Mark Brinkman led a life that exemplified service to others. As a 35-year law enforcement veteran, Mark dedicated his life to serving the communities he lived in and the communities he worked in. It was in the area of traffic safety that Mark's passion lied. Mark often told the story of how an impaired driver fatality of a young girl here in Island County affected him and galvanized his resolve to take action to protect other members of the community to the best of his ability. Mark's resolve was obvious as he walked the walk as a leader in impaired driving enforcement, setting an incredibly high standard throughout the state of Washington. He became a drug recognition expert, practitioner, and a regional trainer. He willingly spoke with anyone about the dangers of impaired driving, related his own personal story of being impacted personally and professionally by an impaired driver. He could regularly be heard on local or national media, educating others in an attempt to make our roadways safer and prevent tragedies for others. He worked tirelessly with the Target Zero program and was known throughout the state for his efforts in traffic safety. Mark led the state for several years with the most DUI arrests, which undoubtedly saved untold members of our community. He leaves behind a legacy in impaired driving enforcement, education, and passion that will be the model for which other officers are measured. In addition to his service to the community, he also served as fellow officers, many of whom are here, as a longtime Linwood Guild president and the vice president of Walk Cops. In those roles, Mark worked tirelessly, both on and off duty, staying engaged with the legislative processes, discussions, and worked to inform policymakers. Mark did all of this because of his passion and belief in the profession of law enforcement and his care for his fellow officers. As you know, Mark also served as local community's youth pastor and active member of his church. As we have sought to honor his life, I have read or heard from many of you and others in the community, in my community and yours, about his deep impact on their life. It is clear from the breadth of these comments how deeply he impacted the lives of so many. When I hear the word legacy, I think about how a person remembered for how they lived their life or how they impacted the lives of others. There's no doubt what Mark Brinkman's legacy is. No question of his impact. Mark was a person who saw a place to serve and he acted. The breadth of his impact is clear. I was advised a few days ago that the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission has planned a statewide impaired driving emphasis for later this year. They now intend to dedicate that effort to Mark. Mark's reach was broad, and each part of his life is linked by examples of selfless service to others. While we're all mourning his loss, we should also celebrate his service and through that honor him. Words alone will not heal the void left by Mark's passing. However, our memories of his life, of his service, his humor, and his passion for others will help us all cope with his loss. Mark will be missed.
And then also from Linwood Police Department, Commander Cole Langdon, who's one of Mark's good friends and also has been serving as a family liaison with the Brinkman family during the last couple of weeks and all the things that have transpired. So, Cole.
I forgot Kleenex. So I had a chance to read some of Admiral William McCraven's new book called The Hero Code, Lessons Learned from Lives Well Lived. And I came across a code that resonated with me, something I read recently, and it reminded me of Mark right away. Quote, the code read, I will use humor to comfort others, never be afraid to laugh at myself. That was Mark. Over the last 2 weeks, I've found very few who can reminisce about the man before it turns a funny anecdote about something Mark said or did that brought them laughter, at least a moment of joy. This is one of the many gifts he left behind. So, I first met Mark in the late summer of 1996. He had recently been hired by Linwood after lateraling from Island County Sheriff's Office. I was 19 and had only been serving as a cadet for about 2 weeks. I didn't know anybody in the building. One of the patrol sergeants asked Mark to give me a ride to the city shop so I could pick up a police car and ferry it back to the department. I was new and had never met Mark before. Now picture this tall, sunglass-wearing, muscled man sporting an impressive mustache telling me to hop into a police car with him. The man posed an impressive image. I grew up with a father who sported a mustache and had always been a fan of Tom Selleck. I admired the stash and admired anyone who could pull off such awesome facial adornment. Mark could pull it off. So as I stepped into this police car, Mark looked at me, locked the doors, obviously for safety, locked the window controls, safety again, safety first, placed the car to drive, proceeded to break wind, releasing his essence into the vehicle, and then proceeded to drive away, making it unsafe for me to jump from the car. I was trapped, unable to defend myself from this assault on my senses. Working through the torrent of emotions, sensory overload, and a couple years of therapy, I came to understand this as Mark's way of letting me know that he cared about me. Now, honestly, I can say this. As one of 4 children, I understood this language clearly. It was the language I spoke. So Mark and I became fast friends. He was my field training officer after I graduated from the academy. He was my partner on one of the first squads I served on, and there's a picture out there of us on a Christmas Eve night watching a movie together as a squad. He was a big brother and a confidant when I needed to talk to someone. He was my regular coffee buddy for 23 years, my advocate and representative when I needed a voice, a guy who helped me put a roof on my house, and a guy who officiated my wedding in 2006 after he was licensed. Many people could say the same words I just uttered. A man could do it all, and I was proud to call him my friend. And as I stand up here speaking about a special man who meant a lot to me, someone who I look forward to spending time with after my law enforcement career ended, I recognize that while my experience and relationship with him was unique, it was not uncommon. Nearly everyone Mark spent time with felt a strong connection and recognized how special he was. Mark had a way of seeing a person and making them feel special, letting them know that they mattered, that he cared about them as they were. He affirmed who you were, loved you for who you were, and made you want to be a better version of yourself. As a cop, Mark was a DUI hound who received national and state level attention that's been mentioned on multiple occasions. He arrested hundreds upon hundreds of affected drivers and saved countless lives through his DUI enforcement efforts over 3 decades. His sheer number of DUI arrests is not likely to be bested anytime soon, if ever. He took his talent for drug recognition work and shared it with others when he became a drug recognition expert instructor, teaching many officers who are present in this room today the science and art of drug recognition work. This is not something that everybody could do. My personal experience with him, he was excellent in stressful or dangerous situations. He could be the calm in a storm that was mentioned, and it served a tactical purpose. I can recall one incident where he stood face to face with a person who was in crisis who was armed with a gun. This call later turned into a large SWAT response. Mark, as he's sitting there across from him, maintained a calm presence, maintained communication with him, and through his steady work and de-escalate the situation was later resolved without injury or loss of life, a life that easily could have been taken. Mark was known for often being hard to understand when he spoke. He would mumble, speak in a low tone, and Chris does a great impression of him. Got to enjoy that this past week. A great indicator that Mark was dealing with a stressful, chaotic, or dangerous situation was when his speech would get very clear and easy to understand on the radio. You knew something was going on and you headed that way. You headed toward whatever call he was on when you could hear him talking clearly. Mark was a long-standing guild president for the Police Officers and Sergeants Guild. He was a leader in our organization, both formal and informally, and throughout the region. He advocated for his officers and sergeants, always making sure their voices were heard. Mark was a great cop who helped establish a culture of hard work and excellence at our organization. But I can't recall the man's work without coming back again and again to the quality of the character of the man. Mark was larger in life. It was the intangibles. He had a great sense of humor that could bring a moment of levity or perspective during a particularly tough call, helping to divert trauma for the involved officers in these heart-wrenching situations. He used his profession as a vehicle for his ministry. He was a confidant, confessor, and counselor to many in our organization. He treated people with dignity, and people were drawn to him. He loved serving his community and never became overly hardened to human suffering after more than 30 years on the job, something that tends to happen to officers. Several years ago, a story I can recall, a woman lost her husband of many years to a vehicle-pedestrian collision. The elderly widow had no extended family or support network and no financial means to put her affairs in order. Mark, on his own time, helped her out, rallied several other officers to do the same, and assisted this woman in moving heavy items, clearing out a storage unit, and helping put her affairs in order that she had neither the money nor physical ability to do, allowing her an opportunity to move forward in life. As I spent the last 2 weeks thinking about Mark's life as a law enforcement professional, several recurring themes keep coming to mind as I remember the man. Legacy, stewardship and advocacy, and grit. Legacy. Law enforcement is often referred to, and the chief mentioned it, as a legacy profession. A legacy is something that is transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor. When Mark stepped in this profession, he entered a constant, unbroken stream of men and women who have been serving and protecting their communities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for many, many years. When someone called for help, the call was answered, and the call will continue to be answered long after. Mark learned valuable lessons from those who preceded him, and he in turn passed on countless lessons and wisdom to those who followed in his footsteps. That collective wisdom is in turn passed down to others. Mark was a standout and a bright spot in the stream of humanity, make no doubt. He left a beautiful legacy that not only on the 3 departments he served, but on law enforcement in this region. When you see a Linwood or Island County car driving down the road, recognize that his handprint is on the person driving that car. His legacy is going to endure. Stewardship and advocacy. Mark wanted to leave his profession better than he found it, and he did. He wanted to give those doing the same work as he a voice. After more than 3 decades serving as a first responder to countless scenes of crisis, Mark had a deep understanding and love for this tough profession. He recognized the need to stand up and represent the people engaged in this profession. And in recent years, Mark had focused his energy on engaging with our legislators through walk-ups, advocating and making sure that the voices of those who are charged with making tough decisions in difficult circumstances and service their communities continue to be heard. Grit. Now, grit can be defined as an individual's trait of perseverance, of effort, combined with a passion for a long-term goal. Whether build multiple houses with his own hands, establishing a vacation property for his family and friends to enjoy fellowship, building a beautiful life with his wife and kids, serving as a youth pastor, or pursuing a successful career in law enforcement, Mark had grit. Many discount his dreams of being in law enforcement, believing him to be too shy and quiet to seriously be considered for the job. Upon graduating from high school, Mark put himself through college, taking law enforcement-related classes, working the whole time. Lester recounted his story to me of going with Mark to the local track so she could test his running time to make sure that he would qualify to get into the ranks. Mark was injured multiple times in his life and in this career. And early in his career as a deputy with Island County, he was involved in a T-bone collision that nearly killed him and left him with a traumatic brain injury. The injury was so extensive that he had to learn how to walk again. Mark didn't let this injury or any other setback in life hold him back from pursuing his dreams and passion. That man knew what he wanted and persevered to make it happen. Mark was a great cop and a great man. While I'll miss him, I'm grateful for the time I had with him and the influence he had on both my professional and personal life. To the Brinkman family, I say this. My hope is that in time your hearts mend and a path towards joy, hope, and love reveals itself, sooner rather than later. You will be in my thoughts and prayers. God bless you, and thank you for sharing so much, Mark, with our beautiful, noble profession. We are better for having had him. Thank you.
If you could be seated for just a couple of minutes. If you came in a little bit late, I made the comment right before we started that if you could hang tight in this room for a few minutes, Newton's going to play some music. You can get up, you can talk, you can, mingle with one another, whatever you'd like to do. But if you could just hang in this room to give the family a chance to use the restroom, to get into the, the escort vehicles, and then they'll leave. And when they've exited, then Newton will dismiss you. So if you, just again, Leslie's, she's broken, and she just needs space. So if you could do that, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you again on behalf of the family. Thank you so much. All the fellow law enforcement people from the city of Linwood, people from Langley and Freeland and Clinton and Oak Harbor, and thank you for being here today. And we have people that flew here to join this because they didn't want to miss it. So thank you, everyone, for being here. It just means so much to Leslie and the family. So hang tight for a few minutes, and then Newton will dismiss you. And you can feel free to talk. You can get up and see somebody that you haven't met for a little while. So thank you again for being here.